Hello, I'm going to be talking about Agrippa I, who is the subject of my archaeological research for my master's thesis, except that I'm going to give the talk a historical emphasis. So Marcus Julius Agrippa I was the grandson of Herod the Great and Mariamme, the Maccabean Jewish princess. The Herods were, in fact, borderline Jews, and they were not accepted by many of the Jews in Judea for this reason. But Mariamme was from the previous Hasmonaean line loved by the Jews. And so for that reason, Agrippa I had good prospects as being part Maccabee. So Agrippa, when he was 5, his mother Berenice took him and his siblings to Rome at the orders of Herod the Great to be raised there and educated among the Julio-Claudian children and Romanize there and network. But one of the reasons for this was probably to prevent them from being further embroiled in conspiracy, because Mariamme and Agrippa's father and uncle had just been involved in conspiracy against Herod the Great and had been put to death for it. So it was successful for Agrippa to grow up among the Julio-Claudians. He says in the record kept by Philo that he is a Roman and a Jew. So he was very Romanized. His mother, Berenice, became close in Rome to Antonia Minor, who was the daughter of Mark Antony, and he himself became close to Drusus, the son of Tiberius Caesar, who, after the death of Germanicus, Drusus soon became the heir apparent, according to Shaw, because in 21 he shared the consulship with his father, and his father in 22 gave him tribunician status and other indications. So he was at the peak of his career then, and so as his best friend and patron and client was Agrippa, both because of his connection to the heir apparent and because of his own background as being part Maccabee and his intelligence, and he had quite a dynamic personality. But it was in 23 CE that suddenly the healthy, athletic Drusus died. And about 8 years later, it was decided that he had been poisoned by Sejanus, the Praetorian prefect. And it makes logical sense that this would be true because Sejanus was extremely ambitious. He couldn't have become the next Caesar because he was equestrian rank, but he soon became Tiberius's next in command. And he was very close to Tiberius as his right-hand man, which put him at enmity with Drusus, who was Tiberius's son and heir apparent. And the two of them quarreled, and it came to a bit of blows where Drusus struck Sejanus. And so had Drusus become the next Caesar, Sejanus would not only have had problems with his career prospects, but probably also have been unsafe. So it does make logical sense that he would have wanted to get rid of Drusus, according to Shaw. And it was at this time that suddenly, also after the death of Agrippa's mother, Berenice, who died around the same time, that Agrippa's prospects were also gone. He'd lost his patron. He couldn't find another one or a job. His inheritance, according to Daniel Schwartz, was quite small because of it having to be the inheritance of Herod the Great needing to be divided among so many descendants. And he soon spent it because he tried to use it with gifts which were part of the culture or custom for client princes, reciprocal gifts to imperial freedmen to try to network and find a position and patron, which didn't seem to work. And he also tried to meet with Tiberius for patronship, and he was thwarted from doing so. But being the best friend of Drusus, I believe that he probably had access to some incriminating information about Sejanus, and Sejanus probably felt a little unsafe, and that's probably why he was thwarted. Antonia, about 8 years later, was the one who warned Tiberius about Sejanus. And in fact, Daniel Schwartz suggests that Agrippa might have been the agent who gave her that information. In any case, soon, according to Josephus, he had a lot of creditors after him. He was in deep debt, and so he needed to flee to a remote part of Judea and go into hiding. I don't believe that the reason was only because of the creditors. He did have creditors and he was in debt, but Antonia was capable of paying that. In fact, when he returned a few years later, which was after the death of Sejanus, back to Italy, Antonia paid off the rest of his debt in a loan, and Tiberius then welcomed him into his presence and gave him a job. So I don't believe creditors are his reason for fleeing to Judea, or the main reason. In any case, he went to Judea and he fled to a remote town that had been abandoned and probably in a bit of ruin at the southernmost border of Judea. The town was called Malata, and he hid in a tower, which might have been an agricultural tower. And according to archaeological excavations at the site, which is believed to be Malata, which is called Tel El Malat, the site was abandoned just before the time of Herod the Great, probably in the time of Antipater, and but it was sparsely inhabited according to the potsherd record in the first half of the 1st century, which would be the time that he was there. So he went into depression from the huge change of fortune and being in hiding in the desert in a ruined town or abandoned town. And his wife Kypros found him, and when he tried to commit suicide or contemplated it. And she then wrote to Herodias, his sister, who had just recently married Antipas. He had not gone there joining any of his family at the time. He had just gone into hiding. I think this is indicative as well. And Antipas was in fact a friend and client of Sejanus, but with persuasion of Herodias and Kypros, Antipas did agree to give him a job as agronomus, and that was in Tiberias. And in that case, he would have given him some sort of protection too, I would imagine, if my theories are correct. And there is an inscription record of an agronomus around the same time in Tiberias named Gaius Julius, but not Marcus Julius. We are not sure what this means. So his experience of going from such a high position to such a low, devastating situation seems to have changed him, his approach, and made him a little cold. The policy of Antipater and Herod the Great had been to be loyal to Rome, regardless of its leader, and to immediately change allegiance between leaders if an enemy even soon took over in power. But Agrippa had been loyal to Drusus in particular, and had not been able to change allegiance somehow to Sejanus, or being accepted by him, or admitted into the presence of Tiberius. So now he was a little bit more cynical, it seems. When he started his job for Antipas, he began to spy on him, and he got some information that he had a large arsenal that could have equipped an army, and that he had perhaps some little dealings with the Parthians, who were the arch enemy of Rome, and Judea was in the sensitive buffer state. And shortly afterwards, he left Antipas and worked a short time for Flaccus, who was the governor of Syria. And it was probably around this time, which would be 31 CE, when Antonia found the right time to let Tiberius know her information about Sejanus. So Sejanus was put to death. And then we find that a year to 2 years later, Agrippa returns to Italy. Antonia pays off his debt, and Tiberius welcomes him and gives him a job tutoring Gemellus, who is the son of Drusus. But according to his new approach now, he tutored Gemellus, but he made friends with Caligula, who was staying with Tiberius on Capri at the time, because he probably saw in him that he would be more likely to be the next heir. And because of his friendship with Caligula, when Tiberius died and Caligula did become the next Caesar, then he rewarded Agrippa with praetorian decorations, the title of king, and the first part of his kingdom. And so his new policy and approach paid off. Later, when Antipas tried to compete with him over having a kingship title, because Antipas was only tetrarch, which is a prince, then he informed on Antipas the information he'd gathered. And when Caligula questioned Antipas, Antipas was not able to deny it. So Caligula took Antipas' territory away from him and added that onto Agrippa's kingdom. When Caligula was assassinated, according to Barbara Levick, Claudius, the uncle of Caligula, might have been at the hidden center of the conspiracy against Caligula, or connected with it. It seems that Claudius was able to let others take blame for whatever he did. He was a little bit covert or manipulative, it seems, according to that theory. So in any case, when Caligula learned about the when Agrippa learned about the assassination, he immediately swore allegiance to to Claudius, and approached him in the Praetorian barracks, where he was protected by the Praetorians, and then went to the Senate and persuaded them not to revolt and to swear allegiance as well. And in turn, again, Claudius rewarded him with the rest of his kingdom, which was larger than the size of the kingdom of Herod the Great. This is despite his friendship, his genuine friendship with Caligula, because he secretly buried him afterwards and told his sisters about it. So after that, it seems that his swing from high to low to high, and pulling himself out of crisis through his own efforts and brains, gave him a renewed confidence and recognition of his ability once again. And since he had grown up so close to the Julio-Claudians, he had a great confidence, and we can see that in one of his coins, which he minted the following year. According to Kropp, this coin might have offended the Romans, and I think perhaps also Claudius, because it shows Claudius being crowned by Agrippa and his younger brother Herod of Chalcis, where unusually they are not smaller than Claudius, but the same size, their heads on the same level, and they seem to show a spirit of power in the way that they hold the crowns or the wreaths over the head of Claudius. This is probably because of Agrippa's confidence in how he was raised among them and how he dealt with them, aside from their careers. So this, together with a couple of other things, he shows his independence. So he began to build a wall around Jerusalem, which Josephus says, had he completed, this is around the northern part of Jerusalem, the third wall, would have prevented successfully any ability to invade Jerusalem. Marsus, the new governor, had some enmity towards Agrippa, probably because his own career wasn't going too well, and stopped him from building the wall, contacted Claudius, who told him to stop, so he did. At the same time, Marsus also broke up a meeting that Agrippa had with some lesser client kings, also in the buffer zone in the same area, who were Jews and Jewish converts, all connected to him. And he did both things without the permission of Rome. He did them independently. So this indicates his confidence. He couldn't become Caesar because he was not ethnically Roman, but he probably felt that he had achieved so much, and he wanted to keep going with his ambitions and maybe be the major person or politician in the area. But this brought him at loggerheads with Marsus, the governor of Syria. Syria actually was supposed to have jurisdiction over Judea. He also clashed with Greek groups in the diaspora and in Judea because of his absolutely pro-Jewish policy. In this way, he differed from all the other Herods, because he was the only one that the Jews actually loved. They were not fond of the other ones. They saw them as usurpers, but not him. And this and several other things gives reason to, or gives motivation for, a potential assassination. So on the day that he first was struck down, he was speaking in the theater in Caesarea. And perhaps he was doing this to try also to get more support from the Greeks who were among the pagan population in Caesarea. And he put on shining silver robes, and people that he may have planted in the crowd, among others, called out, "He is not a man but a god," which was actually pretty common or typical thing in the Greek part of the Roman Empire, but it wasn't approved by the Jews or the Romans. But anyway, he immediately had severe gut pain, and he died 5 days later. In fact, it has been suggested that arsenic can cause these symptoms in very high doses, severe gut pain, death 5 days later, and it's very difficult to trace because it's tasteless. It can also be breathed in. So these are some of the possibilities, and thank you for your attention.